I was in a tragic car accident where I was sitting in the back seat with my mom, with my brother, and my mom was driving. And as we were going along on the road, a motorcycle came up. It was actually a dirt bike. Came up along our side of the road, took off almost half of our car, and he ended up getting killed. Now, I mean, it wasn't our fault, but I felt extremely guilty, and I was scared. You know, I didn't know what was going to happen. So that was pretty much my trigger, which I found out later, which spanned from post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what I actually had first, and that segued into depression. When I went into school, kids were calling me a murderer, that I was, you know, this horrible person because somebody died in the car accident that I was involved in. Even though it really wasn't our fault, I was being called a murderer, and that really did nothing for my self-esteem, let alone my conscience, because I was feeling that feeling of false guilt. I had thoughts that I'd never had before, and thoughts that a young girl of that age shouldn't have at that point in time of their life, you know. Usually that's, you know, when you're young and you're happy and carefree, and that wasn't true for me. It triggered a lot of things for me. I mean, I felt like I had no control over my life, and which triggered an eating disorder in me because of the fact that you can't control what happens to you day to day, but you can control what you put in your body.
Nothing prepares you to deal with death when you're a grown adult, let alone 17. When you're that age, you're going to live forever, as far as you're concerned. Little did I know that that one event would plant the seed for something that would end up changing me forever. But it wouldn't happen overnight. It didn't even happen a week later. It took 12 years. 12 years before I started to realize that something wasn't right.
I had known for a long time that there was something going on, that something was different, because the way Mike usually is, he's always usually very, you know, happy and jokester, you know, that sort of thing. And he wasn't like that for a while, and I didn't know if he was just going through something, but I suspected that something more was going on.
I've always been on the hyper side. You know, I just accepted that as being part of my personality. It was something I was known for. So I thought, okay, I'm an energetic person. So is that such a horrible thing? I like kidding around. I'm a social person. I like being around people. But as I got into my late 20s, that's when things started to change in ways that I didn't like. I felt like I was not in control over what was happening to me. Because one day I could be just, you know, happy and fooling around and just have this excessive amount of energy. And then a short time later, it would just stop without warning. And I couldn't kid around anymore. And there's nothing more frustrating than having people constantly asking you, what's with you? You're not yourself lately. And I didn't have an answer for them. On top of which, there was also this intense sadness hovering over me that I couldn't explain how or why it was there, but it was definitely there. I once described depression, or at least fighting to get out of a depression, because you don't know when it's going to leave. It will leave whenever it chooses to. It's almost like a game of chess with a demon. It really is. You feel like with every game you're fighting to get your soul back.
I don't want to say that I was shocked or surprised, but I was actually happy. Not that he had this, because it's a terrible thing to have, but the fact that he actually now knew what it was and could get help for it.
It was kind of funny now because the tables were turned, and Jenna was now the one giving me advice on how to deal with this.
A list of all the people who had suffered from depression or bipolar disorder or something or the like, and many of them, not all of them, but many of them were creative people, musicians, performers, even psychologists, people like that, people who were meant to study the human mind, you know.
I felt so fortunate. Both my wife and I, felt that there were these wonderful people in our lives now, Jenna and her family, who have already been through this and were just, somebody that we could go and talk to.
There are so many people who suffer from this, and that there is hope to make it better.
Then one afternoon, when I was in a particularly bad state, I had just started therapy. I was channel surfing and I came across a biography special about Patty Duke, whom I'd always admired as an actress. I had watched the Patty Duke show on Nickelodeon many times, and I had performed in The Miracle Worker in high school. And the documentary went into great detail about her tumultuous experience with bipolar disorder. And I was just incredibly moved and very inspired by her courage. I mean, for somebody in her line of work to be that open about such a personal experience and not hiding it, but putting it out there in the open so that other people can learn from it, and someone else who's going through it, or a family who's watching someone going through it, can understand that they are not alone. And I realized maybe that's how I needed to deal with this. Mind you, I'm not a celebrity, but I do love writing, I love the theater, so maybe there is something I can do that'll help me get through this, and maybe it'll help somebody else.